When America buried Audie Murphy, people thought they were burying a legend, a national icon who fought harder and sacrificed more than most could imagine. But what they didn't realize was that they were also burying a secret that didn't die with him. One that still lingers in the classified corners of government vaults, protected by silence, unanswered questions, and fear. Because Audie wasn't just America's most decorated soldier, he was a threat, not to the nation, but to the ones operating in its shadows. And they made sure the world would never hear what he came back to say. Audie Leon Murphy came from nothing. Born on June 20th, 1925, in a dilapidated Texas house with no electricity, one of 12 children. His father was a drifter. His mother worked herself into an early grave. He was picking cotton at age 10 and hunting rabbits to keep his siblings alive. There are no childhood photos of him smiling, no birthday cakes, no classrooms, just survival. At 16, he tried to join the Marines, rejected. Tried the Navy, rejected again. Too small, too skinny, too fragile looking. But the Army, desperate for manpower, looked the other way. And that's how the smallest kid in the platoon became World War II's deadliest soldier. Audie Murphy didn't just fight. He became the fight. He stormed Sicily, charged through France, marched into Germany. Won every medal the military had, not by accident, but through a level of bravery that seemed almost inhuman. He killed over 240 enemy soldiers, was wounded 3 times, survived frostbite, shrapnel, sniper fire, starvation, trench foot, and a shell explosion that nearly tore his leg open. His most famous act happened on January 26, 1945, near Holtzwihr, France. His unit had been attacked, and the casualties were mounting. Instead of retreating, Murphy climbed on top of a burning tank destroyer, grabbed the mounted .50 caliber machine gun, and single-handedly took on over 200 German soldiers. He held them off alone, buying time for his men to regroup. Flames were just inches from detonating the fuel tank beneath him. For that, he received the Medal of Honor. He was 19 years old. America nearly worshipped him. And Hollywood? It came calling fast. Audie Murphy starred in more than 40 films. He wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol. The real-life hero who needed no stunt double. The man who could stare into a camera and look like he'd already seen death 1,000 times, because he had. But the camera couldn't show the war inside his head. He had nightmares, flashbacks, woke up sweating and choking, slept with a .45 under his pillow, said he'd wake up ready to kill, not knowing where or when he was. And in a time when the nation demanded toughness from its soldiers, Audie Murphy did the unthinkable. He admitted he wasn't okay. He told the press that war does something to the soul, that it never really ends, that the silence after the battle is louder than the screaming during it. Decades before PTSD was a recognized condition, Audie Murphy tried to warn America about the psychological cost of war. Nobody wanted to hear it, except the people living it. By the late 1960s, Audie wasn't just an actor or an advocate. He had become a quiet investigator. Something about what he was seeing in VA hospitals, what he was hearing from other veterans, didn't line up. Too many soldiers were coming home broken, not just physically, but mentally, chemically, psychologically. He suspected the government was using its own veterans as test subjects, and then he found proof. Murphy started gathering documentation, cases of experimental drugs given without consent, records of psychiatric manipulation, funding tied to front companies, doctors who weren't just unqualified, they were untraceable, soldiers with permanent neurological damage, some with suspicious deaths labeled as suicides despite no prior signs of depression. It led to one conclusion: the government wasn't just failing its soldiers, it was studying them. There were whispers, words like behavioral control, classified conditioning, and MK Ultra, long before the public ever heard of those terms. Audie Murphy wasn't paranoid. He was on the trail of a real conspiracy. And then he became watched. Government files later confirmed that Audie Murphy had been surveilled under COINTELPRO. He was labeled a potential political disruptor, not because he was violent, not because he was subversive, but because he was about to expose the truth. He scheduled meetings with investigative journalists from major newspapers, began planning a TV expose, had contacted lawyers about whistleblower protection. He was building a case to expose what he called the betrayal of the American fighting man. So what happened? On May 28, 1971, he got on a small twin-engine plane in Virginia. The weather wasn't great, but the pilot was seasoned. The plane was cleared. Murphy had made similar flights dozens of times before. 14 minutes after takeoff, the plane vanished from radar. Local residents reported a sound like an explosion in the air. The wreckage scattered across Brush Mountain. There were no survivors. And within hours, before the bodies were even removed, the official story was already written. Pilot error, bad weather, nothing to see here, case closed. But the case wasn't closed. It was buried. Years later, forensic aircraft analysts revisiting the photographs of the wreck found hairline marks on vital steering components, marks consistent with deliberate tampering. Stress fractures in metal not caused by impact, but by pre-flight sabotage. Someone had made sure the plane wouldn't stay in the air long enough to reach its destination, but long enough to make everything look like a tragic accident. A mechanic later confessed that he saw two unknown men working on the plane the night before the crash. They weren't employees, wore no ID, and left without signing the maintenance log. Their names were nowhere, just like the truth. The aftermath wasn't just suspicious, it was systematic. Murphy's briefcase disappeared. His meeting notes vanished, sensitive medical documents gone, and the witnesses ignored. Over the years, experts, family members, and historians have come to the same chilling conclusion. Audie Murphy wasn't killed by enemy fire, bad weather, or pilot error. He was silenced, not on the battlefield, but in America. What's more heartbreaking than the crash itself is the betrayal. This was a man who bled for his country, who killed for it, who defended it without hesitation. And when he tried to defend the forgotten, the damaged, the discarded soldiers that came after him, his voice became a liability. And the men in charge didn't want a hero they couldn't control, so they created a martyr they never had to listen to. Audie Murphy's death didn't just cut short a life, it cut short a truth, one the world still hasn't heard. Because if a man like Murphy could be erased for speaking it, then no medal is big enough and no sacrifice is safe enough. What killed Audie Murphy wasn't a plane, it was silence. The silence of a country too afraid to face what it had done. The silence that follows every whistleblower. The silence behind a folded flag. And the question that still hangs in the air, why cover up the death of a hero? Unless the truth he died trying to tell was more dangerous than his life. And now, more than 50 years later, Audie Murphy's story is still unfinished. Maybe the real conspiracy isn't what happened to him in that plane, but what we still don't know. Maybe the danger wasn't the secrets he uncovered, but how close he came to exposing them. He fought for the truth, and the truth cost him everything. So now, the real question isn't, how did Audie Murphy die? The real question is, what was he trying to protect us from? And why is that truth still being hidden? If one of the bravest men in American history could be silenced, then we owe it to him and every forgotten soldier to keep asking the questions they never wanted answered. Because some legends don't die. They wait for someone brave enough to finish the story they started.